this, I kind of did some work to it already. I'm going to have to explain that. But what we're looking at, you have an introduction from one of your classmates, okay? And below that, you have a body paragraph. We are going to work with both. However, mainly what we're focused on today is the introduction, right? I have the body paragraph here. I have it, parenthetically cited kind of as background. It's going to help us talk about the introduction at a certain point. But for now, I want to focus on the top half, okay? All right, so what we have, I tell you already, I've gone ahead and broken it up a little bit. We have the intro to the text, maybe. I tried to instill some mystery with the question marks. We have the roadmap, perhaps. And then we have a thesis. Now, I do have questions about all of these in some way, shape, or form centered around what are we trying to do in this paper and how do we go about doing it. Now, I know, especially when it comes to an intro, that most of you aren't sure yourselves. So today is going to, at least at the start, it's not your fault, that's so goddamn distracting. It's the noise. Anyway, so what we're going to do is going to be a little bit different from the top. You need to read the introduction, all broken up. You need to read it, but then we're going to just talk about it immediately. I'm going to tell you a couple things, and we're going to have a conversation. So less to do with what do you think, and more to do with just kind of follow along. All right, so read it first, so it'll make sense to you, and we'll talk about it. Any more time? Like hit me with a shrug. All right. Don't know what that means. One thing I forgot to fix. Sorry, it's a PDF. I should have. Yeah. That happens when you copy and paste from PDF. All right. Now, first thing we're going to do is very easy and probably applies to many of you. I think I know why. We're not going to delve too far into that, but know this. Most of the time, when you talk about an article especially, we don't need the title. Just give me the author. Give me the last name of the author. If I want to know the title, if I want to find out more about that article, I can go to your Works Cited page. That's what it's for. And also, especially in a paper of this length, it's only 4 pages. I know I say that, and in your head you're going, only 4 pages. But your introduction can only be so long. This introduction is a little short, and we're going to talk about that. But even so, the titles are taking up a huge amount of space, and they come usually in the middle of sentences. I saw some of you trying to read and doing kind of like occasionally, because you hit one of those long-ass titles, which is language that doesn't belong in the sentence, and then you got to go back to the sentence. That's a hard thing. So take them out. The other thing this does is I think sometimes you guys trick yourselves into thinking you have more than you do when you have these long article titles, okay? All right, I think that's everything. Yes. All right, the other thing we got to do, we can clean some of this up. So we don't need her full name. We know she wrote an article. We know Koons is an author. Why would we be talking about him otherwise? Oh, we just said, okay, all right, we'll do one of these. We don't need to keep saying he's an author. Thanks, Google. Did I do that or did they do that? That's a weird way to talk about a person. We're going to cut that. All right, that's what we're left with, first of all. After we trim, because by the way too, when you bring in those article titles, it kind of forces a bunch of other language. So it's all this padding that, again, gets in the way in two ways. One, makes it hard to follow what you're saying. And two, makes you think you're saying more than you are. This is what we have. Okay, Miles is here. Macy's here. Julie's here. I got Cameron. Did I miss anybody else? Is that it? Did you guys all come on the same bus? All right. Anyway, now that we have what's left, go ahead and read that roadmap one more time. It'll only take 2 seconds. Now I'm going to ask you if you see any potential issues. Go for it. What do you guys think? Another way to ask this, because obviously this is part of our issue, the roadmap is short. Is there any way you can conceive of, is there anything we need to add to it that you can think of?
Connect ideas, maybe a little bit.
What do you mean?
Connect ideas a little bit.
We could use some synthesis. Oh yeah. It's right there in the name of the paper, right? Yeah. Think back to what we've been doing the past couple classes. And we've been working on body paragraphs, but when you move from this text to this text, you know, we use evidence, but we do it with ideas. Whatever this person's talking about, how do we build to what this person's talking about? That should be reflected in our roadmap in some way, shape, or form. Okay? Now, this will be difficult, and to be quite honest with you, I worry a little bit impossible because this is not our paper. Okay? But we're going to try a little bit. We know some of these texts. So, for instance, Jarvis considers how war is pointless and should not be glorified. Okay, we move to Koons here, but I kind of wonder, and I actually know a little bit, why we don't talk about Vonnegut here, especially if that's what we're interested in, right? That's Vonnegut's jam. Well, I hate doing this. Yeah, we're gonna have to do this. All right. The one piece of the roadmap we can really flesh out is trying to talk about this body paragraph. And it's big, but it's doing some things pretty well. It could be better as well. What I'm interested in, read this body paragraph, we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to come back and we're going to work on the single sentence that's trying to tell us about this body paragraph. Right? Go read this guy. We're going to talk about it. Everybody good? All right. I'm going to guide you through this body paragraph and how we're going to talk about it, because I do want to focus on the intro. First of all, it's doing all right. It could be better. And mainly, this is what I mean. Always, 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 we're going to think about evidence. Do we have good evidence? Fortunately, we do, okay? And are we using that evidence sort of as much as we can? I don't think we are, all right? Well, let's talk about it. We have two texts in this body paragraph. Jarvis stops here. At least our quotations do. Okay. And then we pick up the other one there. All right. So if you just look back at this section, looking at those quotations, and then looking at what we say about them. Now I'm just curious what you think, I suppose. So look back over that. We're going to talk about it. What are we saying about this quotation? Because we got a little bit of something here. What do you, if you could kind of sum up our idea about this quotation, what are we trying to say? Part of it might be because we slip more evidence in here, right? And I understand why, because that is a wild story. By the way, I just found this out like 2 days ago. Apparently, Marine recruiters or Navy recruiters did the same thing with Top Gun when it came out. So it still happens, which is fun. But I almost feel like they wanted to include that because it is so crazy, which is to say we might not need it. It kind of gets in the way. But we have some ideas. We got one in particular that's pretty good. Can anybody pull it out for us? Their idea about this quotation. They're making an argument about Jarvis about the movie, if that makes sense. That's the quotation I think they're most interested in. And then right after it, they say the film's objective was to deliver to the masses what an American man is, someone who, they need a different verb, but sort of embodies that strong masculinity, is ready to perform gruesome acts with no remorse. That's an argument. That's an idea. And it could be, maybe, something Jarvis is trying to say. After that, we immediately go to other evidence. So that's a misstep. Stay with your evidence for longer. The other thing I'll say here, and this is just to help us, I don't know if we need this. We don't use it. We don't use it. So we cut it. We are interested in that quotation. We'll say a little bit about it. For right now, like they might keep this in the paper, but for our purposes to like clean it up a little bit so we can focus, I'm going to cut it. This is what we have left. Okay? Why do we quote? Oh, I mean, that's why we use, yeah, and yes, but when you pull a quotation, what are you pulling it for? Ah, yeah, you quote for language. You guys have been trained, by and large, to quote for ideas. That first quotation, the student wanted the information from it. Paraphrasing. If you really need the information, put it in your own words. You can do it quicker. Let's move on. That's not what we're focused on. It's background information. Okay? They are interested in that second quotation. Let's get to it a lot quicker. Cool. They start talking about it. Now we have more room to talk about it, primarily about the language. Okay? And again, they are interested, and I know that because they're doing that. Okay? Let's talk a little bit more about the quotation. The hard-boiled, blood and guts heroism of American men. What does that even mean? That could be hard to parse, right? For sure, I know it's not how you guys speak, so, but let's hard boiled, you might not get. I think blood and guts you can figure out. What is blood and guts?
Sacrifice.
In a certain sense. In what sense? When we're talking about blood and guts, what are we talking about? Like literally.
Blood and guts. What do you mean?
Your body. Or other people's bodies. And the opening thereof, I suppose. Right? In some way, shape, or form. So we're talking about violence, but in a visceral way. In an intense, like, hand-to-hand fucking horror movie way. Right? Blood and guts. That might be worth thinking about. Because I think it kind of ties into what they're trying to talk about a little bit. Okay? So, blood and guts, hard-boiled, which you might struggle with, that's okay. And then heroism of American men. So something to do with blood and guts gets attached to heroism of American men. So how we define masculine heroism in America. Half of it here comes down to blood and guts. What does that mean, do you think? With the way we talked about blood and guts, what is a hero in a movie like this, according to Jarvis?
I'm not afraid of their answer.
That's one way to put it. But be a little more like dirty, like how? Like
Kill whatever needs to be done. Whether it's
yeah, like supreme, weirdly pun-wise, bloodless violence. Like bloodless in the sense that unfeeling, unbothered by it, right? Serial killer-esque, perhaps. Now my question, does that tie at all maybe into what it seems like they're trying to say about the quotation? I think it does. So the point I'm making is we can better support what we're trying to say by specifically talking about the quotation. Dig into the quotation. Something to the effect of, I don't mind that first sentence, ready to perform gruesome acts with no remorse. Jarvis's focus on the body. I just forgot how to spell this. Yeah. And the gruesome dismemberment thereof. Of such a what's the issue? If we're talking about blood and guts here, like that's our hero, is a guy who can, as Baxter put it, with no remorse. How are we going to talk about that character? Or according to Jarvis, this is like our big idea in these old movies about what it is to be a man, right? What kind of person is that, I guess? Because we're very close to another conversation we've been having, but you got to cross that bridge. I can't do it for you.
they're on the lines about an anti-hero.
Nowadays, funny enough, yeah. You guys don't need to know this at all, but in the 70s, there's a big anti-hero movement, and it's characters who try to do this but suck at it. You get movies like Taxi Driver, where he's basically just a whiner.
Yeah.
He's like a loser character in the end. And it's like, the 70s are very different. But here they win. Here they do all the things that we would want them to do, right? They get celebrated for it. But like, what I mean is, the kind of person who could enact the kind of violence Jarvis is talking about, and be unbothered, like you guys said. What kind of person is that? Or it might be too good a hint.
Machine.
A machine.
Somebody be human. A machine.
Ah, there it was. All right. there's a very good chance, because we're talking about Vonnegut in the second half of this paragraph, there's a very good chance that dehumanize is gonna pay off for us. You know what I'm saying? So let's bring that in. That was something I wanted to add in. But like chanting USA, USA as you eviscerate somebody, like, because she makes it a point to say American, man. So like, that kind of gets wrapped up in there too. All right, that could be enough. Notice too, very quickly, this is still the idea that the student had, but we dug into the details from the quotation. That's going to give you length, which I know you guys like, and also it's going to make me happy. Which at the end of the day, when you get to your rubric, will make you happy. Okay, let's look at the second bit. Same kind of deal. We got two quotations. One from Mary, you were just babies in the war, like the ones upstairs. And then the narrator says they'd been foolish virgins in the war, right at the end of childhood. Okay? What do we say about those quotations? You can reread this section real quick. We're looking for argument. We do have some. I don't know if this will help. We basically have two sentences of analysis. And of course, we need more. Can anybody find one of them for us? One of the two sentences. This is America's least favorite game show.
Like Lost Innocence.
We're for sure interested in that. Can you point us to where we might be talking about some of that?
We're just babies. Babies
What?
are most innocent. Thank you for talking about.
All right, so what you've hit upon is both Mary and the narrator, I would say, he talks about foolish virgins, is talking about innocence and the losing of it and not understanding that at the time. Our student really doesn't, so that could be a missed opportunity. But the first thing we got to figure out is what they do say. They do say something. I'm just curious what it might be. What argument do they make about mostly the narrator and O'Hare? That seems what they're interested in.
They threw away their childhood once they discovered it was not what they hated.
Yeah, that last part I'm not actually clear on, but the first bit, yeah. And again, this I think would tie into that conversation about innocence that we don't quite have on the page, with this idea that they threw it away, they lost it somehow, they didn't know at the time, right? You're so innocent, you don't know that you're losing that innocence type of thing, maybe. That's one. And then this guy, young men falling victim to the glorification portrayed in movies and books, right? All right. So now what we got to do, similar to what we did a moment ago. I don't know that we need both quotations. They're kind of doing the same thing. However, I can appreciate, especially wanting to get Mary as well as the narrator in here. So I could see keeping both. We're going to keep both for just for now, but I understand it's going to be a little more confusing as a result. How do we talk about innocence in either one? Let's start with the first one. In the first quotation, how do we talk about innocence?
Babies.
What about that?
Usually babies are one of the kind of dumb.
For sure. Here's the thing I love telling you guys. I don't think I have yet. Do you know newborns, they don't even know how to poop? Did you know that? They use their whole body. They turn red because they don't know. They don't know how to do it. And so it's a real struggle. You got to learn how to do that. They don't know shit. I'm very proud of myself for that. All right. Let's talk about babies. Clearly, Mary What's the synonym for innocent, the way we've been talking about it? We say babies are dumb, that's kind of rude. What's a better way to put it? It's a word that means you don't know.
Ignorant?
Yeah. Isn't that kind of her point? You didn't know. You couldn't know. Now, if we want, we can get to that next part. How do we connect those two things? If we're saying they don't know what war really is, and somehow they get roped in by the narrative, I think we need one more sentence to kind of sell that. How does being ignorant about real war sort of equal you get roped in by the stories, do you think? I mean, we talked about this with the example that we cut now, but all those guys coming out of Sands of Iwo Jima, 18, 19, going, yeah, I want to do that. That looks fucking awesome, right? Like, clearly they don't know, because clearly it's probably not going to be fucking awesome. But they just saw the movie, and they're like, I'm going to do that. How does that happen for them, do you think? You'd have to make an argument here. Man, I thought this was easy, if I'm being honest with you. How does not knowing... All right, I'll put it to you this way. Are you guys familiar with the term being a mark? Okay. It's a con man's phrase. You're a target. You're easy pickings. You're a mark. How does being innocent, in the way that we're talking about it, make you an easy mark? Because I think that's what we're saying.
You're very manipulated.
Oh, what?
You should manipulate.
Fuck me. 3 people now. You, because you're, and then you, and then you. Go.
Easy to manipulate.
That could be part of it. Let me say manipulate somewhere in the paper. Okay, cool. What'd you have?
I have a word, I can't.
Ooh.
It's like malleable, but that's not really what I'm trying to get at. It's like you're very subjective.
I think malleable would be better, to be honest with you. Because you to shape. Malleable. Yeah, maybe so. What'd you have, Baxter?
Just that they just don't know. Like they
Don't know what?
Like what it's actually like. Like they've never seen it, so how could they know?
That's true. But then why does that make it easy? Why does it make them malleable? Why does it make them easier to manipulate if they don't know the real story? Okay.
Yeah, learned it.
Well, aren't you, for instance, aren't you more likely to believe the narrative that we're talking about if you don't know? Like, if you knew the reality, and you see this all the time now that Twitter's a thing, vets will get on and say that we would never raid a house like that, or that idiot doesn't know how to hold a gun, like all this stuff they'll point out. Or Neil deGrasse Tyson, when he watches a sci-fi movie, talks about how the stars are in the wrong spot. Like, shut up. It's a movie. My point is, those people are experienced, and they know when the story is bogus or when it doesn't make sense. If you don't, you have no reason to suspect, right? That's important.
You can't form your own opinion.
You're dependent upon the narrative in that sense. Like, now we're making more of an argument. Not just that it manipulates, but how it can happen at all. Oh my God. So their ignorance, unfortunately, there it is. The last part we could talk about, maybe. Foolish virgins. We know he's talking about innocence. That's what, virginity, okay? Foolish, though. That's interesting. What does it mean to be foolish? This is a word you guys know, but I don't think you know like you think you do. If that makes sense. What's a fool? Do you think? That guy's a fool, right? Like what does that even mean?
Like, lacking good sense of judgment.
Say what now?
Lacking good sense of judgment.
Yes. I would say that's half of the equation. Okay? So for instance, we got synonyms. Lacking sense and judgment, that guy's an idiot. My 5-year-old, Sam, kind of an idiot. He has no good sense and judgment. He doesn't. He's 5. He's supposed to be an idiot, but he is. Sometimes he's foolish. Fool's a little different. A fool is thinking you know. Is thinking you're not an idiot. That's worse. Now you're talking about confidence when you shouldn't be. So my point is, again, if we dig into the language, if all we're going to talk about is innocence, I say we cut this quotation. It's not helping us. But if we're interested in foolish virgins, now we're talking about how they think they know a thing they have no way to know, as we just talked about. I wouldn't even say they're thoughtless. They were uneducated young men, maybe something like that. They were uneducated young men who right? And you know guys like this, by the way. It's primarily a gender thing. I mean, I'm sure there's some women like it, but a lot of young dudes are like, I know. Okay, buddy, you do. Now we could go further, but I kind of promised you guys we'd talk more about the intro. So here's what we're going to try. Could we connect these together better? Yes. Is it okay for now? I think so. You're going to have to read over the paragraph again, and I'm sorry for that. But at the end here, we got to figure out how we're joining these two things, because we haven't quite done it. Okay? We are interested in innocence. We are interested in something that has to do with how war is portrayed. Okay? Read over this real quick. We got to figure that out. What do you guys think? And we kind of have these two halves right now. Again, the first half is a lot of what we said in previous classes about war, the narrative we have about it, a little bit about how that's kind of joined at the hip to narratives we have about masculinity, right? She says heroic American men, something like that, so they're kind of joined there. But how that stuff is depicted on screen, especially back in like the 60s and stuff, in movies like that, okay? And then we have this other half where Vonnegut's talking about how they didn't know the world, they thought they did, but of course he realizes now, because he's much older, he's experienced, which we probably could have talked about, but he realizes now, looking back, how little he actually knew, how foolish he was, right? To buy that narrative that we're talking about. How do we talk about those together? What does this war narrative, inaccurate though it is, have to do with innocence, do you think? There's a couple ways to talk about it, by the way. There's not one answer here.
A war, I grew up with a lot of innocent lives.
Yeah.
Takes
Well, like killing them?
Killing them and
Which sort of,
even if you come out of the war and you live,
Mhm.
because you're innocent.
you're probably pretty changed most of the time. Not a lot of like happy-go-lucky frontline guys. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's specific enough to work. Like, for instance, she brings up Coons. I happen to know because a lot of you use Coons because he's one of the first people that comes up. I happen to know about that article. She might be able to talk about it in that article. It's a little more in that vein. Jarvis is interested in how it's portrayed, though. Are you taking notes about Coonstone? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You're good. You're okay. I mean it. I was fucking with you. I messed myself up. Oh, so we started down this path. What about innocence? Believing the narrative. What does that have to do with how the narrative is portrayed or how these movies are made, right? We're real close. We got them damn near joined. We just haven't quite done it. You guys are gonna make me do it. I know how to do it. All right. Oh, you're allowed to have your back there. Start with the first half. Somebody tell me about it. What are we arguing about? Movies, war movies. Cool. They make it look awesome, which is inaccurate as far as we know, right? They make it look cooler than it is, right? Like more desirable is the language we used the other day.
They display like a fictional side of it.
Yeah. Okay. And the second half is about how these young men, the narrator and O'Hare, were so innocent they had no way to know how wrong that was, basically. That could be the start, by the way. That's a kind of joining of the two, you know? But I mean, to try to help you guys out a little bit, like we got to talk about something to do with what they're innocent of, or what they don't understand about that reality, or about what gets hidden about that reality. You know, if any of those make sense.
They be innocent in a way of like what war actually is.
That's part of it for sure. But I think that's a start. I don't think that's our end, because they essentially say that, right? That they, you know, what else do they not know? Let's push on that.
The war dehumanized.
That what now?
The war dehumanized.
Maybe.
They don't know anything about life really. I mean, like they're just now starting into what is considered life, so they're learning what life is while going in with an image of what they thought it was, kind of.
Yeah, all right, so let's get more specific than life. Life is too big. I mean, I agree, but again, let's specific to... Dehumanizing is a pretty good swing. I don't... We do that a little bit in the paragraph, but I don't think we do it enough for it to be our main idea here. What else do they not know anything about? Life is too big. Dehumanizing might be just a wee bit too specific.
Being a man, or so, like they don't, like they've been brainwashed more so into seeing what masculinity is from a fictional point of view, and when they go to war and everything, they don't
Maybe.
like.
Maybe. That could be... All right, that's enough to try. Okay, so like something to do with... how's that for an introductory clause? I kind of thought I would just fix it for their innocence, we talked a lot about their ignorance, but you're saying they That's a big ugly sentence that I wrote. You didn't do that. But this idea that they're not prepared and they think they are. We're really leaning into this foolish quality. They think they know. I've seen movies. I know what it is to be a soldier and a big strong man because I saw a bunch of movies growing up like that, you know? My dad told me a couple things when I was 8. He told me how it really was. Yeah. Alright. That's a whole lot of work we did to try. Talk about this sentence. To remind you, this sentence, I'm pretty sure, is trying to encapsulate the conversation happening in this paragraph. Holy shit. That's a tall order. That is a tall order in that sentence. Now, to be fair to the student, they are not incorrect. Jarvis does consider how war is pointless and should not be glorified. For sure that happens. But we can be more specific now. Primarily, we can try to actually convey the discussion we just had. It's not just Jarvis in this paragraph. It's Jarvis and Vonnegut, right? What did they do? We just spent 20 probably minutes talking about it. What did Jarvis and Vonnegut do when we put them together?
Shed a more realistic light on what war actually is.
Jarvis does? You think? Or both?
That sounds about it.
Oh, okay.
We try to tell the harsh reality.
Jarvis agrees with Vonnegut that war films in particular, So what are we saying here? The first part, we're forcing ourselves to synthesize. Jarvis agrees with Vonnegut. You have to, when you do that, talk about both. You can still do it wrong. I'm not saying you guys won't surprise me. You can still do it wrong, but you're forcing yourself to try, okay? Jarvis agrees with Vonnegut that war films in particular are terribly inaccurate. Yeah, I feel good about that. I feel like they would both be like, yeah, those are terrible. Okay. Vonnegut goes further, however, because kind of the way we wrote the paragraph, we end up saying Vonnegut takes this a step further. That these same narratives are all these young minds really have when it comes to forming their opinions about such topics. The implication being, since we just said that the war movies are inaccurate, if all they have to form their ideas about what war is inaccurate films, therefore their opinions are also inaccurate. You see what I'm saying? Awesome. That's what we got to do through the whole roadmap, honestly. Now here again, we don't have the rest of the paper, nor would we have time to go into every paragraph, right? But whatever Coons is doing focuses on masculinity in Slaughterhouse-Five, something to do with dehumanization. Cool. That's really vague. I think we could do similar work to what we did here. In that case, okay? Same thing goes for whatever Coleman's talking about with time and free will. John Dewey, we're bringing in a damn philosopher. I actually had to ask my wife because she was a philosophy major. I was like, tell me a little about Dewey. She's like, he's boring. So, But all that is to say, there's a lot here that's not in the roadmap. It's just not here at all. Now, part of that might be because we've written the introduction. Maybe these body paragraphs don't exist yet. But I'm telling you now, this student, but also all of you, whatever you have, it's probably pretty close to this, okay? View this more as a skeleton of your introduction. This is not your introduction. Go write the body paragraphs, dig into them like we did, get specific. You can do it in the roadmap too, okay? That's what we're trying to do. After all of that, we can try for a thesis. But I'm gonna talk about this one real quick. I don't know what this means. I'm being clear with you. And look, I mean it when I say I don't know that the student does either right now. I think that's a strong possibility. By John, I'm pretty sure they mean Dewey. Something to do with their philosophies are criticized for opposite reasons. I don't know what that criticism is. I don't know what the opposite reasons are. All of that needs to show up in the roadmap, all right? And then ultimately, this may or may not be your thesis. I don't even know. I don't know. Here's what I can tell you about your thesis. You don't have to, you absolutely do not have to name drop everybody in your thesis statement. That's going to be brutal. Try to not do that. If we did, it'd be Vonnegut, Coons, Jarvis, and Coleman. That's bananas. However, the other thing you can do is use more than one sentence. I know you don't want to, but it is a thesis statement. It is not a thesis sentence. It can be more than one. I mean that in this case. Here's what we're supposed to do, and we're going to talk about another part of the introduction here in a second. When it comes to a thesis, though, when it comes to this paper, what we're trying to do, sum up, for me, the conversation that occurs in your paper. You got 4 texts, right? And they might agree at times, they might disagree, they might modify each other's position, whatever, right? But now you're trying, like, it'd be equivalent to if you were in a room with 4 of your friends and they were talking about whatever. Conversations tend to meander, right? They go places. And then after that hour was up, you came out of the room and I was like, in like 20 seconds, man, what did those people, just give me the gist. That's what your thesis is here. Really. Okay? You're going to need more than one sentence. These people agree on this idea. That's a sentence. However, these people point out blah and you know that's going to be how this runs in almost every case. Any questions at this stage? Because I got one more thing to talk about, but I've been talking a lot. Okay. The other thing I want to point out to you, and there was no way for us to have this conversation until you actually wrote your intros. I do feel bad about it though. Intro to text. This is a small matter, but I actually think it will help you when it comes to your introductions. I understand why you think Slaughterhouse-Five is your text. Okay? And even in some cases, like we do here, we try to bring in the other ones really quickly. I'm going to try to say this in a way that makes sense. The way we talk about text in a class like this, classically speaking, you're like, oh, words on a page. That is a text. Yes. Text is anything you can study, actually. So like in our next unit, we're going to watch Die Hard. Well, that's a movie, right? There's no book parts. Right? It's a bunch of bang, bang. The text we're looking at in this paper, technically, is not Slaughterhouse-Five. It is not the articles. It is all of them. And I'll say it again. It's the conversation happening between these articles. Okay? And we know part of it. We know part of it now. So we could take a swing like that's at least a big part of the conversation we're trying to have, right? Honestly, I'd probably go a little bit further and include how these things are represented, if that makes sense. Because what I've said here is how he represents them, but he also makes a point to represent how they're represented. Does that make sense? Okay. That would start my second sentence, and then from there, I don't know how they want to talk about Coons. I for damn sure don't know how they want to talk about Coleman in any meaningful way. But 2-3 sentences at the top introduce the conversation that's happening between these texts, right? It will probably help you when it comes to your roadmap, and all of it should help you when it comes to your thesis. That's how the introduction needs to work in this paper. Okay? Questions about that? Or about anything? Okay. I was gonna have you guys work for a little bit. I don't think I am. I'm just gonna let you go. Is that okay? I kind of thought you would feel that way.
It's how I feel.
Alright. Really quick, when you guys can pack up or whatever. I want to highlight what we got. That sound cuts through my brain like a knife. Alright, I want to highlight what we got coming up real quick. Alright, your rough draft is due next time. That's on turnitin.com. It's not your fault. It's just like, Jesus Christ. All right. I was waiting for it to happen again. I understand that's not great news, you know, especially if you're a little bit behind on the homework, which means you're behind on the paper. You know, real talk though. Whatever shape the rough draft is in, if you can get it in by class time, Tuesday, your week next week is going to be so much better. That's the only way I know how to sell it to you. Will your weekend maybe suck a little bit? Yeah. Will your week next week be way worse if you don't make that happen? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm just saying, whatever shape it's in, all of you, I would put money on, have work to do on the intro. Do that, but then remember, you got to get the body of the thing done, honestly, before you can really shape up the introduction very much. So, yes, sir.
So about our body paragraphs.
Yes.
Do I have to use talk about all my references
In a single paragraph?
Yeah.
Don't do that.
I was thinking, I didn't know, and I did do that, and then my paragraph was over 600 words.
Yeah.
Should we pretty much take it from what evidence we have and just do maybe
I would say 2 to 3 texts in a single paragraph. Almost never 4, but at least 2, because again, you're trying to do synthesis, right? What I would say too, whatever paragraph you have that has all 4 and sounds like it's a monster, there's a really good chance that you could break it in half somewhere. Because what probably happens is maybe your first 2 or 3 texts are talking about a thing and you shoehorn the other one in, but by the time you write that much, the conversation is going to be so different at the bottom as opposed to the top that you should find a place to be able to break it, if that makes sense. But yeah, you never, I almost never do 4.
I'll just make sure.
No, yeah, that's a natural thing to think you maybe got to do. Do the body of the paper, do the intro, get your rough draft in as good a shape as you can, turn it in so your week is better. The last thing I want to remind you about, Die Hard. We're watching it for Unit 3. I don't know when that is right now because I use the syllabus as well, but I know that it's soon because you're turning in rough drafts, and that's how that works. You just got to be able to watch it some kind of a way. It's different places. I haven't looked it up lately because it changes, but maybe sometime over the weekend, just kind of figure out how you're going to get that movie watched, basically. And it's
Sorry, we're watching it at home.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
I think it's Thursday that we do the walkthrough of it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we'll look at scenes in here, but we're not gonna watch the movie. What I'll tell you about it too, because there's 50 of them now. It's the first Die Hard. Bruce Willis has hair. It came out in '88, I believe. So yeah, that's the one we're looking at. All right. It is an excellent movie. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.